welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Welcome to the Birmingham Green Doors webinar. This is a webinar for anybody interested in making their homes more energy efficient, whether you're a homeowner, a retrofitter, or a larger organisation rolling out at scale. There will be more online events for Retrofit Action Week in May, so please do look out for those, and I'll be letting you know at the end about our next Birmingham Green Doors event, which is in person at the end of the month. Today we'll be talking to Lewis, who you can see, as I said before, he's up front and centre in my picture. I hope he is in yours. If you would like to pin Lewis so that you can see him, if you go up to view in the top right hand corner, you can press on speaker, or you can hover over Lewis, go up to the three dots in the corner and pin him if you would like to be able to see him at all times. In terms of our subject today, Lewis is going to be talking about putting a heat pump into his 100-year-old house. And the structure for today is that I'm going to be kicking off with a few questions for Lewis. He's going to show us some pictures of all of the different things that he's done and the impact that it's had. Then we're going to have a little pause, and I'm going to ask you, you're going to have a minute or so to think up any questions that you have for Lewis, but please do pop questions into the chat box as Lewis is chatting to us, and when he's finished with his sort of core presentation, I'll be picking up those questions, but also giving you a bit of extra time to come up with any other questions you've got, and then we'll be putting those questions to Lewis. And that's really what we'll be doing today. We'll be finished by 8:30 promptly, if not a little bit before. But before we start, I always think you should ask people before you tell them anything. So I have a question to you, which I'd love you to answer in the chat box. And my question is, what are you most hoping to learn today? What are you most hoping to learn today? That's in the chat box. And if you'd like to type in your answers. Saying from Danielle, she's on it there. A 1937 that has barely any other insulation. Would a heat pump be suitable? And I'm interested for my own home, which is also going to be 100 years old next year and has minimal insulation because I've got solid brick walls. Lovely. Thank you, Trevor. We will definitely be covering the cost of Lewis's installations. I'm lucky enough to have seen the slides already, so we'll be answering that. Oh, electricity tariffs. Nice one, Phil. Yep, I'm pretty sure we're going to cover that too. And some information about the preliminaries before installing a heat pump and the running costs. I know the running costs are in there. I'm just going to make a note of that one so that we can come back to it if we want to. There we go. Thank you so much for that question, Carol. What you're wanting to learn. Anything more on what you're wanting to learn today? Feasible in older properties. Yep, spot on. That is definitely what we're going to be talking about there, Sylvia. Anything more that you are hoping to learn today? Good stuff. Then without further ado, knowing that those questions are there, I am going to move over now to Lewis. While Lewis is chatting, feel free to stay off mute unless you've got a noisy dog or something like that, in which case please do mute. We're quite a small and intimate group. But I'm going to come to Lewis now. And just before we go to your slides, Lewis, what's the commitment you hold that started you off on this journey? What sparked your interest in sustainability?
Yeah, great question. I've been interested in climate and sustainability for ages, actually. I think I went and studied engineering at uni already with the intention of using that for sustainability type things. I didn't know if that was going to be hydrogen cars or nuclear power or what, but I thought the kind of use of technology to get some of our environmental problems a bit more in control was something that interested me. So it goes right back to school days, really. Um, and then it's taken a long time since then to get to the stage where I'm in control of a house and I can actually do the things that I've been thinking about for so long. So that was quite nice.
Excellent stuff. And what was your house like before you started, Lewis?
Not that much has changed. So I've been here for about 3 years. Um, and I think probably what's quite different about this place compared to some other Green Doors houses is that I haven't done the big uh deep what's the word renovation and gutting the place and completely rebuilding everything. A lot of it is the same way it was when I moved in. Um, I ended up redoing the kitchen um, because I first house I bought and I didn't know what to look for and I didn't spot just how much the kitchen was falling apart. And it was all held together by blue tack, and the day I moved in, it all disintegrated. So I had to take that on unexpectedly. But of course, that's nothing to do with energy. So insulation wise, it's all as it was when I found it, which is very average.
Do you want to show us some pictures, Lewis? Are you okay to screen share?
Yes. One sec.
Fantastic. Can you give me a thumbs up? Can everybody see that? Lovely stuff. Go for it, Lewis. Do you want to tell us about your home?
Yeah, this is the same set of slides that I used for an in-person uh open day. So I have to virtually welcome you to the house this time. But yeah, so it's a three-bed end of terrace, and it's definitely Victorian built. I can see the houses across the street from us are 1880 something build date, so it's actually a bit more than 100 years old. Um, Three beds, 85 square meters. So it's actually quite a good sort of representation of the average British house in a lot of ways. In kind of number of bedrooms and everything. It's actually probably a bit older than average. Um, and yeah, like I say, so because it's Victorian build, it's solid brick construction. There's no cavity wall at all, so no cavity to fill, just solid walls. There's this fairly nasty pebble dash on the outside, which was nothing to do with me. Um, and it already had quite quite normal loft insulation when I moved in. So reasonably good loft insulation, but just quite typical what you'd expect to see in a lot of houses now, and double glazing as well.
Fantastic. And you've got there in bold air source heat pump. Is that the main change that you've made, Lewis?
Yeah, it's really in in terms of energy, I've focused on one big change to the house. So it had gas central heating and a combi boiler when I moved in, which is really common. I could see pretty quickly the boiler was on its last legs. It needed attention. It wasn't going to get through many more winters. So the easy option would have been a like for like combi boiler swap. Um, but so I work in energy. I know that we're trying to move away from installing new fossil fuel burning kit. So this felt like the right moment to avoid putting in a new bit of kit that would burn gas for the next 20 years.
Just out of
Um,
interest, Lewis, how much would a combi boiler have cost you?
I think that probably would have been something like 2 to 3 thousand to
Okay.
replace the boiler. That's what I think is the kind of going rate. So that needed to happen anyway,
Yeah.
because that boiler was not going to last much longer. So yeah, I went straight to heat pump. instead of a new boiler. And then when the kitchen needed done, I went to an induction hob instead of gas hob,
Mhm.
which is a very small change, really, in terms of energy. But what it does mean is that you're then totally off gas, so you can disconnect from gas, stop paying the standing charge. And it's that sort of symbolic victory of being able to say you're completely off fossil fuels.
Excellent. I like your style. And so, what's your next slide?
Next up. Right, so this is, oh, it's not showing properly. Let me see if I can, there we go. Um, right, so there are a few kind of energy nerdy techie slides and then some other stuff as well. But this is the bit I find really impressive. What I've done is looked at the bills before and after we changed from boiler to heat pump to get an idea of what's happened with energy. So before with the boiler, um, all of this orange in the chart is gas that we were burning to keep the house warm. So we were using about 12,000 kilowatt hours a year to put heat into the house. And the boiler used another 3,000 or so per year just on inefficiency. So that's just hot gas blowing out the flue of the boiler. So all in all, what's that, 15,000 or so?
Wow.
That's how much fuel we had to burn to stay warm. And there's a little slice of electricity used for the electric shower we used to have as well. And switching to a heat pump, we're keeping the same house warm, but most of that heat, most of that energy is coming from the air outdoors. It's being extracted from the air in the garden, which is the part I find really magic, because you can see um, just how much of what we need is now renewable. And then that little wedge, that red wedge there is the electricity the heat pump needs to use to do that. So you can see it's a very small slice of what we needed to use before in fuel to get the same result. Same thing for hot water. That's the part that even as an engineer, I find this amazing. I get up on freezing cold mornings. The house is warm. We can have a hot shower, and all of that heat has somehow come out of the freezing air outside. So yeah, the doing this one thing, not thinking about things like insulation and solar panels, has reduced our energy usage so dramatically. Um, it's down to about a quarter of what we were using before for heating and hot water.
Wow, that's absolutely extraordinary. Fantastic. And what's been the impact of that in terms of why it matters and how that relates to your day job?
So what do we have next on here? Oh, this is just drop this in between to show the heat pump has an app on my phone for controlling it and seeing how it's running. So that shows this is just showing what was on the last slide, coming out of the heat pump app. So you can see it's showing how much energy it uses over the year and how much heat it's pulling out of the air by doing that. For any heat pump people who have been doing their research already, it's running with a COP of 3.7. And that's an important number because what that means is that for every unit of electricity it's using, it's putting 3.7 units of heat into the house. So that's like having a 370% efficient boiler compared to boilers in the real world are about 80-90% efficient.
Wow,
Um,
fantastic.
and this one on the right is our electricity app, so the electricity supplier app. And this is just kind of to prove that keeping this old Victorian house warm all the time with a heat pump is um, we're still ending up with completely reasonable bills. They haven't shot up or anything like that. But
Fantastic.
yes, after a question about the kind of significance of this, in So just thinking about the climate side of things, the reason I really focus on moving off gas at home and moving on to electricity is that this shows the electricity grid getting cleaner over time. So you can see in the past 15 years or so, the carbon emissions from the grid have dropped off a lot. That's as we've been shutting down coal power stations and building more wind farms and solar. And the plan is for the grid to keep getting cleaner out into the future until it becomes almost zero carbon. So the reason that matters a lot for this is that at home, the most impactful thing we can do climate wise is moving all of our energy use off fossil fuels and onto the electricity grid because that's becoming cleaner. So moving to electric cars, moving to electric heat pumps instead of burning gas and petrol is very high impact.
Fantastic. And now we've got the emissions as well. Do you want to talk us through those?
Yeah. So I did a bit of rough calculation to try and work out how much difference this has made to our carbon emissions as a household. And it looks like with the old boiler, the gas boiler, we would have been producing about 3 tons of carbon dioxide per year. So to put that into perspective, because it's very abstract, uh, return flight to New York is just under 2 tons of CO2. And running a car for a year, typical car, typical mileage, is a little over 1.5 tons per year. So the move to the heat pump, at the moment, it's brought us down to about half a ton per year from that little bit of electricity it uses. And then as the electricity grid keeps getting cleaner in the future, that will shrink even more without us having to do anything. It gets cleaner. We've kind of done our bit that it's over to the grid. So yeah, you can see the drop off is big. It's like giving up a car or avoiding flying into New York every year.
Well, it looks to me like it's more like giving up nearly 2 cars. Is that correct? Pretty
Yeah.
much.
So what's the difference? It's about a 2.5 ton saving. Giving up a car is 1.7. Yeah, maybe 1.5 cars, something
Yeah,
like that.
1.5 cars. So a tiny car and a big gas guzzling car. Fantastic. Thank you, Lewis. Good stuff. And in terms of so I'm just checking my notes here. What's the impact for the climate? Is there anything more that you'd say about that?
I think is that my last bit on climate?
Sorry, your
Yeah.
running costs. I made a mistake there. The impact on your bills and the running costs is what I meant
Oh
to
yeah,
ask you
okay.
about.
Yeah, so this is the part I think I think about this stuff in my day job as well, and I think we've got more work to do to to get this to get this to the point where it's attractive to everyone. Um, so yeah, I showed how the energy use of this is a lot lower, and you would think, great, that's going to be a massive saving. The problem is electricity costs about 4 times as much as gas does. So even though we're using a lot less energy and causing a lot less emissions, um, on a bog standard electricity and gas tariff, you wouldn't expect to see much difference in your bills. So what I've got here is the red one is about how much we were spending on the gas boiler before. Now that was not being especially comfortable. It was our first winter here was during the start of the gas crisis with Ukraine. So we had the thermostat down at 17 degrees, which was not very, very cozy. Heating off overnight and when we're out through the day and things like that. So it was okay. Wasn't cozy. Um, and now we've got the heat pump on all the time, so that the house is always warm, day and night, and you can see our bills are, well, sorry, our bills would be quite similar if we were on a very ordinary electricity tariff. But where it gets a bit more interesting is when you look at special tariffs for heat pumps. And this is what I think we need more of to make this work for people, and really kind of pull everyone in. So it's quite early days experimental at the moment. That's what's maybe a bit more tricky about this. Um, the tariff I think probably looks best at the moment is one that OVO are doing for heat pumps, but they're not doing it for every kind of heat pump. Um, that comes with a pretty solid discount. And if you signed up to that tariff with a heat pump, you'd be down at quite a serious saving against using a gas boiler. We've been using Octopus Agile, which is very variable. I don't know if I'd recommend it to everyone. It's a bit of a gamble. Our first year, I think we saved something like £400 on heating. This winter, I'm not sure if we're going to save anything. So it's very it's not something that's easy to make predictions on, and it's one for people who like a bit of unpredictability. But
What I'm hearing you say, Lewis, is that despite the fact that electricity is 4 times as expensive, your house is much warmer and cozier, and your bills are either the same or slightly less, or quite a bit less actually. 400 quid is not squirrel feed.
yeah, that's right. And yeah, what I'm saying is if we were on uh, a normal tariff, our bills would be about the same, but we can get the bills down with special tariffs.
Fantastic, fantastic. And so, how did you do all of this? What did it cost you, and what money were you able to pull in?
See, I got next. Ah, perfect. Yeah, so at the moment, there's a grant going for anyone who's moving from um, a fossil fuel boiler or even electric heating to a heat pump. So it's a £7,500 grant from the government. There are no strings really. It's not only for low income or particular types of homes or anything like that. It's open to everyone. Um, you can get that grant towards the cost of the heat pump. I think the average cost of installing a heat pump across the country right now is somewhere around 13,000. So I ended up spending my cost ended up being pretty average. I spent about 4,500, and then the grant paid for 7,500.
And Lewis,
Um,
did you expect to pay 4,500, and you paid 4,500, or was it a bit more expensive than you expected? How did that pan out?
um, I wasn't sure what to expect exactly. I spent quite a while chasing quotes. I got some very high quotes, I have to say, and didn't go any further with those. Uh, I ended up doing this a bit of a funny way because I'd I'd sort of taught myself quite a lot about heat pump design, um, and got to know a few people who were working in the space, and I ended up working together with somebody to do the design and grant application, and then hired a plumber and electrician to install the design. So that's unusual. Like I wouldn't, recommend my friends and family to do things that way. Um, but it ended up with costs coming out probably about the same as you'd pay to an installer to just take care of everything for you. So yeah, I think when I was first looking for quotes, I got quite a big range from different people. So definitely, it's the usual thing. It's important to get a few quotes, shop around a bit, and get a feel for what's on offer.
Mhm. Fantastic. And I think you've got some photos of the process.
Yes. Um, yeah. So that's the old boiler coming out on the left and getting dumped in the garden after its 20 years of service. So yeah, I haven't mentioned, have I? Aldi, I Part of the job included changing just about all of the radiators, all but one. So 5 radiators got swapped to bigger ones. And actually, that was not, um, it wasn't too much of a headache. They turned up on Monday morning, big army of guys, and got that job done in the space of one morning. We had 5 radiators out and in before we knew it. So it actually wasn't too much of a disruptive job to do that. Um, you can see on the photo on the right, there was a little bit of pipework change where there was an easy access to some in the upstairs landing. I think they thought they could get away without doing that, but since it was easy to get to, they might as well go for some bigger pipes. I
And
kind of,
those, just looking at those floorboards coming up, how much disruption was there for you? I mean, how long was your house kind of out of action, not very comfortable?
oh, that was one day. It was like that.
Wow.
Um, most of the job in total took about 4 days, 4.5 days.
Wow.
Um, but a lot of the time they were working on. There's a new hot water tank that went in. There's a photo of that coming up in a bit, and the heat pump itself, which sits outside. So that was all kind of mostly contained to the kitchen area at the back. Heat pump, hot water tank, pipes. That's where they spent most of those days. And there was just that one day really where it was a bit more, they were in every room changing every radiator.
Mhm.
But that, yeah, it was over pretty quickly.
Fantastic. So very different from a whole house renovation, and yet you've had the incredible impacts that you've described to us.
Yeah. And yeah, I struggled to find many. I should have taken more before photos actually, but I found one where just by chance you can see the old radiator in the dining room. Um, and you can compare that to the new one, which is same kind of depth and height, but it's just that bit wider. So it doesn't really change the usable space in the room.
Mhm.
We got them upstairs, which are now double depth instead of single depth. So again, it's not really noticeable. But what that does, the bigger radiators, they work better with the lower temperatures that heat pumps run efficiently at. Um, so as long as the radiators are well matched to the home, this is the key thing. You can keep any home warm with a heat pump, even if it's got quite high heat loss, quite bad insulation, as long as the radiators are well matched.
It's really quite something, isn't it?
This is the big moment of the heat pump itself turning up on the back of a big lorry.
And it looks huge, Lewis. How big was it once it was unwrapped?
Yeah, I was a bit startled because I'd done obviously, I was used to the measurements and everything and thinking about where it was going to go, but then it turned up and I did have that moment of thinking, oh God, is that going to fit? But it did fit. Have I got yeah, so the photo on the right shows the heat pump um in its location. So it's sitting right in front of the kitchen window there. You can see it's really crammed in because we're in this terrace. I think it's quite a good case of showing the kind of home people think a heat pump might be impossible to make work, but it is doable. I was a little bit worried about it being in this tight space and not having enough airflow around it because what a heat pump is doing, it's sucking heat out of the air, making the air colder and blowing that cold air out. And if that cold air is trapped in a corner, it might not run as efficiently. But I changed one fence panel to a fence panel with slats in it to make sure that
Uh-huh.
cold air could get out, and it's running efficiently, so I didn't need to worry about that.
Fantastic. And I'm just going to pick up a question from the chat box. Danielle was asking, how was the decision about appropriate radiator size made? Was that by the heat pump installers?
Yeah, that would be the installers normally. This is where my kind of unusual way of doing it is a bit weird, but I went through the process of sizing the radiators really just for my own interest and making sure everything was going to be done right. Um, you wouldn't normally have to think about that. What happens is the installers should come around and measure up all of your rooms, um, check what kind of building, what kind of construction type the house is, and then they just do a calculation for every room to work out how much heat it needs, and so how much, what size of radiators each room needs. That's the bit where you have to do a good job of that to get a good result. And the problem we sometimes have is that we've got a bit of a culture of plumbers just kind of chucking in any old boiler, and it does the job. It might not be the most efficient, but it more or less works. And you can't really get away with that. You do have to do proper heating design, which we should have been doing all along. We should have been doing that with boilers as well. Um,
Was that
but
something that you could trust your installer with?
yeah, so I've got some links at the end, but there's a there's a website, HeatGeek, which has a directory of installers you can look up by postcode, and that's a place I would point people towards to have a bit of confidence that they're going to do a proper job of this. Um,
Stuff.
and it's not rocket science. It's pretty simple. It's like I say, it's measuring the rooms, it's checking what the house is built out of, and as long as you do that, you'll get a heat pump which can keep you warm and run at good costs. You can't just chuck one in without measuring the house up properly.
Well, good to see it in that narrow space. I've got a lean-to down the side of my house, which is also about the same age. So that's really interesting to me. Have we got any more photos, Lewis? We're coming to the end of our time, and it's nearly time to check back on the questions we already have and invite people to ask their questions. But are there any more photos here?
Yeah, there are just a couple more. So yeah, this one on the left is the hot water tank, and I was quite lucky actually. There's a little nook in between the kitchen and bathroom, which was
Mhm.
just the right size for the tank.
Lovely.
So this is because we were going from a combi boiler, which doesn't need a hot water tank, to a heat pump, and heat pumps do. It's kind of a shame that we spent the last 20 years going to combis and taking out all of our hot water tanks, really. But they can go in lofts because I know space will be an issue for a lot of people. And there's also, again, HeatGeek. I promise I don't work for them or anything, but they've brought out a hot water tank which can go in the same cupboard space as a boiler. So if you're taking a boiler out of a cupboard, you can put one of their tanks in the same space. And I could see that being um, a good option for a lot of these narrow little houses.
Could that tank have gone into your side passage, Lewis, or is that not appropriate?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've seen people discussing that option. I don't think it's commonly done, but it's definitely possible if you get it right. And I
Okay.
think it's an interesting. I think it might be worth the sort of thing that if installers can start to offer that to people, it could be the right choice for, a lot of folk who just don't have the space to give up.
Really
Um,
interesting. Thank you. And here we are with the snow.
we have to obviously have to have this photo just to prove it works. So yeah, we've had the heat pump in for 2 winters now, or this is the second winter. Um, we've been down to, I think, -7 is the coldest temperature I've spotted. You can see this is a snap from the app on a night when it was down at -5, and um, the house was just staying at the temperature we had it set to. We don't have it. I don't like it much hotter than this, but if you set it to 21, it would be at 21. That would be fine. So yeah, it's kind of nice just to have actually proved it by living in it that the heat pump always it does keep us warm on the coldest nights. It has no problem with that.
Fantastic. And if I may, Lewis, I'm just going to start to scroll back a little bit. And apologies, everybody, for not picking up one or two questions at the time. And it may be apologies to you, Lewis, if it's a little bit difficult. But back on one of your first slides, you had a figure of 9756 kilowatts. And Trevor was asking what that figure related to.
756.
There
Yeah.
you go. That's, sorry, I'm pointing at the screen. That's not very helpful, is it?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that is, if we're saying that we're putting about 12,000 units of heat into the house over a year to keep it warm, with the heat pump, 9,700 of those are coming from the air outside. And then about 3,000 is the electricity it uses to run, which also ends up as a contribution to the heat in the house. So if you add these two together, the 3,000 from electricity, the nine and a bit from air, you get the just checking, it does add up to 12,000.
Well, I'm not going to query that on Lewis. I'm useless at adding stuff up.
So Lewis, can I clarify that? So you've calculated the thermal energy moving from the air to the water in the heat pump in terms of kilowatt hours, is that right? So that 9756 is the transfer of thermal energy from the air to the water in the heat pumps.
Exactly, yeah. And I actually get all of this from the heat pump app, which is really nice for
Okay.
going, if you love to go into the details.
Yeah.
The heat pump app actually shows me the portion, so it calls it environmental yield, and that's
Right.
the energy it transfers out of the air outdoors
Yeah.
into the hot water in the house.
Got it. Yeah.
Good stuff. Thank you so much. And Richard Barrier was saying at some point, what do you mean not every kind of heat pump? And I'm so sorry, Richard, do you want to explain what that question was about?
Yeah, hi. It was something you mentioned about the OVO energy tariff not being available to every kind of heat pump.
Oh yeah, and that also, I think Danielle's question is the same, isn't it?
I think so, yes. Yeah.
Off the top of my head, I think they cover something like three manufacturers, and you have to have them connected to the internet. So my one is that's why I can see what's going on the app. But yeah, the deal with OVO is that I think they want to see what's going on in the heat pump. It's kind of like their chance to, the energy companies want to know how these things are going to work, how much energy they're going to use on cold days and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And so if OVO can get that access to data from one of the manufacturers they've kind of partnered up with, they give you a discount on your energy. So I think off the top of my head, Valent are one of the ones that are eligible. Mitsubishi, maybe.
Okay. That's fine. I understand. Thank you. I'm with OVO, so I guess I can ask them, to be honest.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's actually something to investigate, Lewis, before you choose it. It might influence which heat pump you're going to buy.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And this is why I say I think we have a bit more progress to make here, because really I think it needs to be at the point where you just know confidently that whatever you do, you're going to get a good deal on your tariff. But right now it's very early days. It feels like you might get a good deal if you're savvy and you have the right heat pump and the energy company keeps it going for long enough. But I think it needs to be a bit more straightforward.
Okay, thank you. That's a really important point.
Thank
you, Richard, for your question.
Can I just add one quick thing?
Sure.
I think my boiler is 20 years. I think my boiler is probably more like 35 years old. So I suspect it's going to run out anyway. So this is another practical reason that I'm doing something about this as well.
Yeah.
So anyway,
that's exactly what I'm thinking as well, Richard. It's got to go anyway, so why not change? Fantastic.
It's great. Okay. It's great to be ahead of it, because this is another one of the difficulties about this. The process of getting quotes, getting a date booked in, waiting for the job, it's all that much slower than a boiler swap. So, you know, if your boiler goes kaput in the middle of winter, you might be able to get a new one the next day just about. But it's not that fast with heat pumps. So it is worth thinking ahead a bit more with them.
So Lewis, how long was the process for you? Because I'm been so impressed with how quick the fitting was and how not disruptive. But how long do you think it actually took you to get quotes, get dates, get the right heat pump?
That was long, I'm afraid. And I mean, that was partly because of my own pickiness, but I was making inquiries, chasing quotes, quite early days after I moved in, but ended up going through a whole extra winter before going ahead with one. So it must have been more than a year I was kind of on the lookout for the right job.
So given that I wouldn't be designing it myself, Lewis, if I started now, could I confidently say that I'd have a heat pump by September?
Yeah, I think that's doable. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And by what time would it be too late for this winter?
I'm trying to think of what I've heard from other people getting them. I think maybe looking at around about a month or two lead time.
Well, that seems like I've changed my phone less quick than that, Lewis. So I'm pretty impressed with that. Maybe it's just me. Thank you. I'm just scrolling through the questions again. We dealt with the questions about radiator size. And Danielle, you were saying after your question about appropriate radiator size, you said, how would that work with the smaller tank that goes with it? I can see that this wouldn't fit in my boiler cupboard, for example. You did say a few things about different spaces. Danielle, do you still have a question about that, or has Lewis covered it?
No, I don't think it was covered. I think Lewis's point that there are certain tanks designed to fit in old boiler cupboards is very appealing, but I can see there's that little red tank. I don't know what that's for, but it's part of it, isn't it? That wouldn't fit in my space. So I'm just wondering how that would work.
Yeah, that's a good question. One of these tanks is not needed by that heat geek tank I was talking about. I think the other is though. So you might see there are actually two of these little things are expansion vessels. One of them, yeah, like it's not needed by the heat geek tank. The other one I think can be a bit smaller. The other thing is it doesn't all need to go in the same place, if that helps at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you could squeeze that in a different corner.
And it looks as though Phil's got some wisdom to share with us. Is it okay if I bring Phil in?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, just picking up on the thing about the expansion tank. Not all heat pump manufacturers use expansion tanks.
Is that the red thing?
Yeah. You know, it varies from manufacturer to manufacturer. So if that's an issue, I mean, heat pump installers tend to a typical small business that does heat pumps will have a preferred manufacturer because it's supplied through their builder's merchant or their supply chain. And so yeah, they'll say, oh, we recommend a Mitsubishi, and that might well be right for you, but it's also that it's right for the installer. But yeah, if you shop around, you don't have to have, because the Green Doors event that we went to at Dudley the other week, they got a heat pump, and a lot of people said, "What's that?" Yeah, they pointed to the expansion tank and said, "What's that?" Because that people aren't used to seeing them in domestic houses, and you don't normally get them on a boiler, but sometimes you do get them on a heat pump, and sometimes you don't.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Phil. And Joachim or Joachim, sorry if I've mispronounced that, is just saying how important it is to find a competent heat pump installer, even if they might be a little bit more expensive than others. And I think, Lewis, you were saying that you found HeatGeek very useful in terms of finding a competent installer. Is that correct?
It's I did the Heat Geek training course during during lockdown. Funny kind of activity for lockdown, but there you go. I saw that they were giving away courses. They had something. They had spare spaces on a government-funded scheme, and they were just offering them out. So I started to get interested in this stuff anyway. Took the course, learned about all the pipes and expansion vessels and everything that we're talking about. But that was where I started to get a sense of what's important to get right to get heat pumps to work well. So that's when I understood that they work fine in old houses. That's not a problem, but you do need to get things like radiator sizing right. And so anyone who's taken that course, they get the Heat Geek certification. I think I've got a link. Here it is. Yeah. So that's the website, or you can just Google Heat Geek as well, and you'll find it. So if installers have that certification, then you know that they've learned about the calculations we were talking about before, where you measure up rooms and you check that each radiator is the right size and so on. And they're not just going to chuck in whatever they've got in the back of the van that day and hope for the best. And that's really what makes or breaks. If you hear about people not being warm enough with a heat pump or having high bills or things like that, it will be because someone didn't actually go through the design calculations. They just dropped the heat pump in without checking radiators and things.
So really a competent installer is really important. I'm just got my eye on the time, Lewis, and I want to come to Danielle's question because it's a bit of a deal breaker. She's saying, how onerous was the application for the grant?
Well, that's taken care of by the installer, so that wasn't onerous for me at all. So that's a nice thing. And yeah, like I say, it's not means tested or anything. You don't have to give your income or any details like that. So that's all taken care of.
And Lewis, does that also mean that you are literally just paying the £4,500? You're not trying to find money up front and then then paying it back once you get the grant? Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Well, I didn't know that. Thank you very much for that question, Danielle. I'm just going to nip back to Trevor's question. Trevor's asking if you looked at the Octopus Cozy tariff.
It's so yeah, right now we're on the Octopus Agile tariff, it's kind of similar. It has the high and low cost periods throughout the day. So you can save a bit of money by, running the dishwasher at night, turning the heating up a little bit when it's cheap and down a little bit when it's expensive, and that sort of thing. And it's very, very susceptible to what's going on in the world with gas prices and things, and as well as what's going on with wind and sun and all those kind of things. So it's not for everyone. I think this winter we actually would have been better off on the cozy tariff. So that's a much more predictable tariff. It's got high and low prices over the day, but it doesn't go doesn't shoot up one day and drop down the next day. It's predictable and it's the same every day. So yeah, I think that's another good one. Octopus Cozy. So that's a tariff that's specifically for heat pumps. It's not restricted to certain types. You can use any heat pump as far as I know with it. You don't need to have the right one. And I suppose the question with Cozy is how much you end up saving, and it could vary quite a lot depending on how you use your heat pump. I think what I like about the OVO one is it's quite predictable. You can see how much you're going to save. With Cozy, you need to do a bit of tweaking to try and kind of use as much as you can when it's cheap and use as little as you can when it's expensive. And no one can really tell you for sure how much you'll save because you can't guarantee how well you'll be able to move your usage around. But yes, you can almost certainly save against standard tariff with that one as well.
Good stuff. Thank you so much for that, Lewis. I am just scrolling through, and I would encourage everybody to scroll through the chat because we're getting some nice top tips from other people who are here in the room. Joachim, I think, was talking about the horizontal cylinder there, which would fit into a space. And we've got comments from Phil on closed plumbing systems do need the expansion tanks, and open plumbing systems don't require them. So Phil, can heat pumps be either? Richard is asking.
Yes, and I'm just typing a comment on this.
Great.
Because what I'm thinking is that one of us, which probably means me or Danielle and probably me, should go back to previous Green Doors events where we've had a heat pump, and other people known to us, and to ask them, did you have an expansion tank, and also look at various people that I've advised and other people in the Green Doors network like Shaz, look at people that we've advised that have gone on to have heat pumps and do a quick head count. How many have got an expansion tank and how many haven't? Which manufacturers use an expansion tank and which don't?
Good stuff. Thank you very much for that, Phil. We'll look forward to hearing all about that. I am just scrolling back, and I'm hoping that I've covered everything. I'm just looking at what Joachim has said. What is the smallest heat pump? And Lewis is saying he hasn't seen anything smaller than 3 kilowatts for an outdoor system, and I think exhaust air heat pumps are well suited to very low heat loss. Does anybody have, I hope I've covered everything in the chat. Trevor, you're saying you saved 22% on your home energy costs using Octopus Cozy compared to a dual fuel tariff with gas and electric. Danielle, you're asking Lewis, did you have all of your radiators across your property changed or just a couple? Oh,
Yeah,
you've answered it. I'm so sorry. I see it there. 5 out of 6, but maybe you were unlucky with your old house. Good stuff. Does anybody have any further questions for Lewis? Do you know what, Lewis? I would. Yes, sorry. Go, Danielle.
Was that change of radiators all covered? Wait, so that extra that £4,500 that you paid, Lewis, that covered that change of all of those radiators?
Yeah, the total cost was for everything. So yeah, 7.5 plus 4.5 covered the whole lot: the hot water tank, the plumbing, the heat pump. Yeah, when you see heat pump costs,
would sorry to interrupt you. What I'm asking is, had you would not have had all 5 out of 6 radiators changed, would you have had to pay £4,500 or less?
no, it should have been a bit less if there were fewer radiators. And often that's a mistake I've seen in things like newspaper comments and the likes. Is that people look at the total costs of 13,000 average, let's say, before the grant, and say, and that's just for the heat pump. Then you've got to pay for radiators and hot water tank and plumbing. But actually, that number it's the whole job. Heat pumps themselves are not that expensive. They're a few thousand. It's just there's a lot of labor in the job that adds to the cost.
Thank you so much.
I've seen people criticizing this, saying, if it's £13,000, you'll get the grant first time, but what about when you need to change the heat pump in 20 years and the grant's gone? But of course, then it is just like a boiler swap at that point. You don't have all those costs of changing everything in the house. So you won't need the grant because it will be a much cheaper job just to swap a heat pump.
Good point. Thank you so much, Lewis. It's almost time for us to wind up. Does anybody have a burning question they'd like to put to Lewis before we start to wrap up today? No, nothing else. Lewis, I would love to know what was what do you wish you'd known when you started?
What do I wish I'd known? Ooh. I'm not sure. I don't know if I have a good answer for that one. I think I spent a lot longer than I hoped trying to decide what to do about all of this. So yeah, I suppose I didn't expect to spend. I didn't think it would take me this long to decide on the right option and go for it. So it would have been nice to know from the start. I suppose just having a bit more confidence in what the right solution was from the start. But I don't think there's anything I would have done differently. So
and Lewis,
yeah.
is this something that somebody can do if they don't have your specialist knowledge and your willingness to, for instance, do the Heat Geek qualification?
Oh yeah, that's all. That's really for people installing the stuff rather than customers. So yeah, a good installer should take care of everything. It really, this shouldn't be any different from any other kind of heating system in the way that you shouldn't need to know any of the details about how it works or anything. You should just be able to go and ask someone and they take care of it all for you. That's really where we need to be for this to take off at scale. But yeah, a good installer will handle all of the technical detail.
Good. And I've heard you say that there are savings, but they're not like massive. But what about doing this has been, you've gone, you know what, this is totally worthwhile?
I think it's just the for me it's the kind of the impressiveness that it is possible. And I notice it when if we're getting home on a freezing cold night, it's frosty air, you open the front door and you get that kind of wall of heat hit you when you walk into the house. And it's times like that I'm thinking, wow, that came from that cold frosty air. That's mind-blowing. And there's nothing being I've walked into the house and thought there must be something burning to make this heat. That can't just, it's surely not possible to just kind of get it out of the air. So it's that kind of feeling of, all right, there is this does work. We can get off fossil fuels. It's possible. It still feels like an uphill struggle to, we've got 25 million homes with boilers to get through all of these changes, but knowing that it works and it's possible and we can be warm without burning stuff is pretty amazing.
Fantastic. And one final question for you, Lewis. If you're going to leave this audience with one final message or one final piece of advice, what would it be?
I think it would be, we hear a lot of negativity about British housing stock. It's old and drafty and impossible to keep warm. And a lot of people really believe that heat pumps just don't work in them. So I think the thing I push back on is that actually our houses are not that difficult to keep warm if you know what you're doing. That stuff about just measuring the rooms and designing the heating for it. If you do that right, it's quite easy to keep our old Victorian houses warm.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lewis. I think one of the things that I've really taken from chatting with you before and after the seminar is just the importance of moving away from fossil fuels and the possibility of having a fossil fuel free home, which is not something that had occurred to me that I could do. So thank you so much for that. If you'd like to stop sharing your screen, Lewis, rest assured, everybody, we have recorded this session. So if you were late, you will be able to access the recording after this. Phil will be able also to share the meeting chat so that people can see all of these interesting things about the sizes of pumps and so on. Good stuff. Well, thank you, everybody. There is one thing, apart from thanking Lewis, thank you so much, Lewis. That was absolutely great. And thank you for sharing your home with us. But I would love to hear from you in the chat box, please. What's been your key takeaway from our talk from Lewis today and from the webinar in general? What's been your key takeaway from today? And I'll pop that question into the chat box. There we go. Yeah, now you feel, Danielle, that's what I'm thinking as well. Just get on with it. I've got a question as well, Phil. I don't know if you could respond to this, but is this something that, if you're thinking that it might not be your forever home and you're moving on, is it something that's going to affect the value of your home, or is that neither here nor there?
I was thinking that as well, Steph. So thanks for asking.
I'm not aware of anything any research which has looked at the impact of the heat pump on the value of a home.
Yes, there is. There's a report by WWF and Scottish Power published in 2022. They did a big research project, and they included a model for looking at house values, and they estimated that in a standard kind of 3-bedroom house, the increase in value could be between 1.7 and 3%.
Wow.
So if you work that out on sort of average house prices, you could get as much as 6 to 10 grand value increase on your house based on that model. And that, interestingly, the report predicted that lower cost values will actually probably have a higher value increase than more expensive houses. So if sort of lower income families do this, as well as lowering their running costs, they will probably find that they have increased their value of the house enough to cover the cost of the installation.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much, Trevor, for sharing all of your information, because I understand you've got your own heat pump as well. So it's really lovely that you've come along today and added to all of the knowledge in the room.
Yes,
thank you.
It's really, really brilliant, Lewis. Well done.
Trevor, I don't suppose you could, if you happen to have a link to that research, or if you could drop it in.
Yeah, I can send that. Yeah, no problem.
Lovely. That would be absolutely great. And I have one final question to you all, which is, what has made, whoops, I'm in the wrong box. Don't know what happened just there. What has made today's session time well spent for you? And if we could just have that into the chat box, please. What has made today's session time well spent for you?
I think something, just looking at the that comment about passive house and comfort, cold surfaces and everything. I didn't really talk much about the insulation options for the house because I did look at the possibility of external wall insulation. So that's the only option I have with solid walls is, well, external or internal wall insulation. And it's just the cost and complexity of doing that which put me off. So I got quotes of about £20,000. Plus, I think it might have triggered a need to extend the roof, and then that could maybe trigger roof replacement and things like that. So that's the sort of thing where it spirals into this deep house gutting and, you know, total refurbishment. So it would have its advantages. Insulating would bring down bills, and it would make the house more evenly warm, more like a modern house. It's not a bad thing to do. But I think what I realized was if I thought of it like it's either new boiler or insulation and heat pump and roof and whatever else, I would have just had to go for the boiler. I didn't have that much money. The project was too complex. So if a new boiler and no insulation is okay, then new heat pump and no insulation is probably okay as well, because that's actually, you know, still a big step forward carbon wise. So I think I'm trying to say it's kind of hard to get the balance right, but it's not don't do insulation if you can, and it's going to benefit you and everything. But that if insulation is too hard, that doesn't need to block getting off gas.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lewis. I am going to be leaving today thinking about Lewis walking into the Caribbean heat of his home, and that this is completely possible to get away from fossil fuels, and that's actually what we all need to be doing. We have one or two notices. Danielle, Phil, I might have made notes, or I might need to ask you yourselves. I've got written down, Phil is having an in-person Birmingham Green Doors of his own full house renovation on Saturday the 29th of March, 11 till 12:30, and I'm sure, Phil, that we'll be sending flyers and publicity for that to everyone that's been here. Is that the case?
Yes, there's only a few places left.
Oh, get them while you can.
However, if you can't make it on the 29th, we will have another one in May during Retrofit Action Week. And also, for those of you that aren't in Birmingham, we will have a webinar also in May.
Good stuff.
And
Danielle,
this is going to be dynamite, because I'm going to share my experience of working with contractors, which is very, very interesting indeed.
Excellent. The green gossip, as we say. Danielle, you had something to say about feedback.
Yeah, I'll pop it in the chat again. Really appreciate your feedback on this event. It really does help us to secure more funding, to have feedback and to know. I mean, your comments have been great, and is feedback in itself, but anything else you can tell us will be fantastic. Thank you. And if better still, if we can attribute a quote to you to encourage others to come to our events, that is really helpful.
Superb. Well, it's coming up to 8:30. I'm sure you've all got loved ones to spend time with and dinners to eat and so on. Thank you all so much for your time, but also a massive shout out to Lewis. Thank you so much for inviting us into your home, Lewis, and sharing all of those details with us. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure there's going to be at least one or two people here who are going to be taking action because of what you have done, setting this example and sharing your story with us. Brilliant stuff. I hope to see you all at another Birmingham Green Doors event. Danielle, Phil, is there anything I've forgotten to say? Superb. Have wonderful evenings, everybody. It's time for a glass of wine or whatever you fancy. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Trevor.